Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome to the third live session for this course, Environment Development. I welcome you all once again, and please feel free to log in anytime. And then if you have any query, please uh, pose it so that I can uh, make a possible extent of answering to your query. So meanwhile, what I do is give a brief summary of what we have discussed in the last couple of weeks, and then try and get back to if there is any queries from any of the participants online. So the past few weeks, we have deliberated upon the few themes, more importantly, development theory to and then gender approach to development, how we engage with the debates on development by looking into the relationship between gender and development per se. So we also looked into some of the theoretical approaches with regards to development, such as modernization theory or maybe underdevelopment and dependency theory, and also neoliberalism. And we begin looking at the emergence of feminist movement, particularly in the West and that of the third world societies, how they have tried to look into the issues of women in different contexts and aspects as such. So we are also looking into some of the issues pertaining to what climate change and what are the confronting issues and how climate change has been perceived and then understood. So in a sense, particularly in the global south, we can say that climate change to a large extent, particularly in the eastern Himalayas, which are more susceptible to environmental changes and biodiversity threats, are more prone to such forms of changes. And there are also a couple of studies which try to address some of the, because of the anthropogenic forces, where climate change has been at a very fastest pace, and these eventually not only disrupt the environment as such, but also the livelihood concerns of people across these areas. One very peculiar thing about the issues of climate change as such is because the inhabitants of these regions or areas are very much dependent on the resources in their immediate surroundings. So any forms or disruptions or depletions of resources are going to affect them in the long run, primarily because any forms of disruptions of these resources would have a deep implications on their means of existence. So therefore, and we all know that what are the factors which are mostly responsible for this process of climate change, which can be categorized as one anthropogenic and then the other which is perceived to be, natural in nature. Now, one very peculiar examples which we can, talk about in our everyday discourses with regards to climate change is the phenomenon of this flood. Because when we talk about any forms of, flood, usually the conventional notion is that floods happens mostly, in the banks of the rivers, or maybe in rural areas, mostly in the monsoon period. But the past a few decades or so, we have witnessed that the unprecedented phenomenon of these floods, which are mostly situated in the urban areas. So the urban flooding is very much rampant, and to many assumes that these are primarily because of climate change and so forth. To some extent, it may be, but these are also the case studies which reveals that these are mostly to do with the man-made disasters, which are very much anthropogenic in nature. Now, climate change again, for suppose mostly who are in the riparian communities, who have been very much anticipating such forms of floods owing to climate change, are now finding it very difficult, because to many of these communities, floods has become very unpredictable at times, particularly because when flood comes, the durations of its stays are longer than what it is usually being perceived to be. So therefore, the coping mechanisms of people, the concerned people who have been affected, becomes very problematic, and therefore they becomes vulnerable to such forms of phenomenon. Now, we're also looking into how ecological knowledge, biodiversity conservation, and sustainability, the interrelationship is, and then I have engaged with looking at how the indigenous peoples, particularly, are mostly affected, and then their notions of knowledge concerning ecology and environment is to a large extent look into. Now, for quite some time, the traditional knowledge or indigenous knowledge systems are not given enough space, and then primarily because, as I had discussed the past few weeks, about how religion plays, and then the notions of religion vis-a-vis the environment. Because there was a deep concern when we talk about religion with regards to environment, because if at all religion has to be brought into the forefront of these issues of environment, then many are pretty much skeptical, for the simple reason that they may have to compromise with the objectivity of knowledge, particularly science. But then increasingly there's an urging needs to bring in religion, simply because what we perceive about ecology to a large extent is mostly because of our belief, our thinking, our imaginations, which are very much embedded in the religious thinking or religious ethos. So much of the non-Western societies, mostly who adhere to the practice of animism or maybe totemism, or name any religion, historically they have shared a very intricate relationship with nature. So these Eurocentric or Western notions of scientific thinking, which primarily target or try to create a binary between the human and nature, is absent in many of these belief systems. Therefore, we could see that they share a very close affinity, and therefore this correlationship sort of generate a form of knowledge system, which is partly responsible for the conservations of the environment, and because many of their practices happens to have a very positive implications in the long run. Now, this course, Environment and Development, try to, bring it, or rather flag certain issues with regards to, sustainability, and then the debates of, environment and development, how the trade-off usually takes place, and then people at the receiving end mostly uh, do, suffered primarily because whether it's the marginalized or the indigenous people, uh, at the course of their own existence, many of these development initiatives or these policies are usually the state-led development policies are being executed. So therefore, we could see that this sort of uh, uh, dialogic, confrontations or conflict, which are mostly, often witnessed in all these issues. So in this particular course, what we also tries to, look into is to engage with different forms of environmental ethics, particularly the notions of, deep ecology and social ecology, and Marx's understandings of ecology. And because I have deliberate upon different paradigms of or discourses of how do we make sense of the environment by looking at some of the philosophers, particularly uh, Anines and Murray books, wherein they try to create or bring in an alternative to these environmental problems which we human have encountered in the past few decades or so. So some of their findings, what they have argued is that the ecological crisis which we have witnessed is not so much outside the domain of the human society, but it is very much integrated and inherent in the social structure. So, for instance, the historians like Lin White Jr. would argue that the historical roots of our ecological crisis is very much relevant in nature, and then he goes on to, give a critique of why the Western centric Christianity, Western oriented Christianity, is responsible for the chaos which has been created. Because he have also mentioned that Christian religion in its Western Eurocentric form is very much anthropocentric in nature. And therefore, since the problem is being generated because of that, it is religious in nature, then perhaps the solution also lies there. And then similarly, if you look at the works of Murray Bookchin, wherein he says that by positing these notions of social ecology, it attempts to situate the environmental issues very much within the social structure, wherein there is hierarchy, and then where people becomes very manipulative, and then dominance in terms of they're dominating their fellow human beings in the pursuit of the material wealth. So that's forms of social hierarchy which is being embedded in the social structure to a large extent is reflected when it comes to we negotiating or trying to relate ourselves with nature. So these forms of dominance in other sense is very much integral in terms of the way we try to exploit or appropriate nature for our own short-term gains or benefit. So this greed, which is very much integral part of human society, is by and large part of this. So I've also looked into some of the way in which how natural resources are being managed, and over there we begins with the Garrett Hardin's seminal works on the tragedy of the commons, where he bring in the forefront that privatizations of resources perhaps could be the way out. But equally, another antithesis has been put forward by Elinor Ostrom, wherein she argued that resources are mostly, commonly owned. Therefore, these common resources are mostly, conserved and then better sustained by the communities. So therefore, she sort of posits that the community participation, common resource of management is the only way. So therefore, we have also looked into the other forms of environmental movement, and then with regards to the resistance against anti-development or such forms of uh, infrastructure building such as dams and others. So overall, in a nutshell, if you put it, this particular course actually aims and then tries to situate the environment with regards to development, and then how these notions of development needs to be critically examined, and how the human have for generations been responsible with the interventions of the use of science and technology. They have exploited resources to a large extent. So overall, I once again thank you all for opting for this particular courses, and what we can perhaps looks into is also see if because many of the questions for the final exams are very much embedded in the lectures and then the lecture slides itself, which are often mostly circulated. So you really don't require an extra readings for it if one intricately look into the lectures and then listen to them, and the nature of the questions, as you all know, is multiple choice in nature. So, so once again, I thank you all, and wish you all the best for your exam. And that's all. Thank you.